Hey guys, it's Duke DeLate for the Intimacy Liberation Army, and today we're talking about practical tips on how to talk to a woman and attract them in conversation. As you guys may or may not know, I've been a dating coach for professionally since 2012, so 10 years, and then I was interning for 4 years before that, so I have quite a bit of experience dealing with men in particular. I spent a lot of time doing men trying to attract women, um, and I've seen everything under the sun. There's from live workshops where we have people go approach to countless like one-on-one sessions, dealing with guys' problems or whatever. And I have some more esoteric, like self-knowledge, confidence stuff coming out in the next couple of days. But today I wanted to give you a practical, kind of step-by-step system to come off well and create attraction rather than fumbling around and not knowing what to say or not knowing how to take things to the next level. Um, it's important to remember when you're talking about attraction that everybody's different. That what may work for one person doesn't work for the other. What attracts one woman doesn't necessarily attract another. If you go super deep into personality typing, for instance, if you look into the Myers-Briggs type stuff, there's a whole channel. His name's C.S. Joseph. If you go check him out on YouTube, he'll talk about how particular personality types interact with other personality types and where they don't match and how they don't where they where they do match and what there's so much depth into the differences between humans that attract to not. But I'm going to give you some general tips socially for basically like Western women, like people in the States, people, it's we've worked this stuff all over the world, but there's very different nuances wherever you go. Like when you go down to Asia, you have different things, right? Like when I was in Thailand, the being fun was way more important than it would be in LA. And when I was in Serbia, being sound minded, like having a plan, having ambition was a lot more important than it would be in California, for instance. So there's some diversity between what attracts a woman to a man in general, as well as for straight relationships, and also between different personality types, between different trauma levels, between different um, what's healthy and what's not. And I was talking to this girl today. She's one of my close friends, and she's actually attracted to traumatic, toxic relationships because she feels very significant. She knows how to deal with those things. She spent years grinding out those types of relationships, so she's very comfortable in that space, and that's kind of what her attraction triggers are kind of attached to. And for her, it's not a choice. Like if a guy comes in and he shows these sort of toxic traits, it's controlling, a little bit of narcissism, keeping her on red, like that kind of stuff. She's really like motivated to chase it. And a lot of the guys in the red pill community will talk to you about this type of um, control mechanisms and power dynamics, and so those things come into play too. I'm not gonna tell you that that's not true and it doesn't work, but um, here on this channel and in my current study, I'm more interested in finding emotionally healthy ways to create longevity and to create uh, lasting self worth through the practice of these social skills. And so I'm not, um, I'll probably do quite a few videos on like manipulative stuff and coercion and whatever. But my goal here is to become more emotionally intelligent and become more um, effective in the world at healing the people that you come into contact with just by your way of being. And I haven't quite figured it out just yet, but as I continue and study and I continue to test and field and I continue to explore, you'll be along with me on that journey. and I'll kind of tell you what's working for me and what's not. And I'm not pretending to be some sort of guru or anything, but I have seen a lot of interactions over the years doing this professionally, and so I think my insight has a particular value that you guys can use. So today's the practical application of how to attract a woman in conversation generally. There's going to be a lot of nuances. There's obviously going to be um, exceptions to the rules, etc. And I by no means am saying this is the be all end all de facto thing that you need to learn, but I think it's going to be a good primer for you to go out and get yourself in front of people, which I want to say is the most important thing ever. I think the direction I'm going to drive a lot of the social practice stuff for the next few weeks is the idea of progressive iteration I was talking about yesterday on the YouTube video. It was called the personal growth strategy that always works. I want you to go out, no matter who you are, and I want you to find people to interact with, so that you can practice throwing yourself into the mix in real time. The things that you get from the real world, the lessons that you learn, some of them will be a little bit harsher. They're not sanitized. You're not just sitting here reading a book. Like this guy. I trained with this guy for a little while. Mihao. Yeah. How to talk to hot women. Right. This book. You sit here and you read this book and you see all of his theories that are great. They're the way that he's built his conversational structure is pretty phenomenal. But if you don't go out and practice, you don't go talk to people in real life, like, all of this stuff's theory. Like every other self-help book on my system here, we have How to Be Nice to Yourself, and Listen, Love, Repeat, and The Language of Letting Go, Emotional Fitness for Intimacy. All these books that are on my stack, right? These guys are PhDs. These guys are dating authors and columnists and people who put months and months of work into a book so that they can give you the tips and tricks that they've seen from their perspective. And they're really smart. Like, they're not dumb people. But if you don't go apply them in real life, then you're never going to have the skill set that comes with the practical application. So what I want you to do is to, when you hear this stuff, write shit down, go grab a notebook or whatever, write things down, or voice note into your phone, or whatever you do. And once you figure out that something that you think might work for you, that doesn't push your boundaries too much, go out and try it. Go out and talk to somebody in real life and see what kind of results you're getting. Because when you get that feedback, then you can come back and learn the nuances of whatever comes back. We were talking about progressive iteration yesterday, and you basically do one thing, you figure out all the responses that could possibly be the case, and then you come up with ways to deal with those things, and then you move forward, and eventually you build this massive skill set that's kind of instinctual. It becomes more natural for you. So in the next bunch of minutes, I don't want you to sit around like, oh yeah, that's a good concept, but I want you to go out, try it in real life, and then come back and send me an email, comment, and whatever, and you see what your actual results are. Because that's how you're going to learn. That's how you're going to push forward. That's how you're going to progress. All right. So step number one of creating attraction in a woman when you approach her. Start with something that's socially acceptable. There's a bunch of different ways that we've learned over the years, lines that we've used. We jump out at girls, on the street, and or create a big a scene, and we start a dance party on the street outside of a club, and like there's all these different tactics that we've used. I pulled my belt off, like R.C. Luke, and would create a limbo, and invite girls in to do that stuff. Like, there's all sorts of cool YouTube-y ways where you go out and you're like, creating a spectacle and creating status in that way. But it's all relatively low percentage. Like, the guys who are really making strides in the cold approach scenes. They approach with inane stuff. Um, and so we always say start with a genuine compliment or something you find interesting or appealing about them specifically. You don't want to come out with a robot line like, oh my God, you're very beautiful. Oh my God, you're very beautiful. Oh my God, you're very beautiful. Because it doesn't come off well. It doesn't seem authentic. And so they're going to be a little untrustworthy of what you're going to say next if you come off and you give this non-vulnerable, non-authentic compliment that is just kind of scripted. It just, you don't get the micro calibrated movements. You don't have all the little micro expressions coming through that gives you any sort of authenticity, and they don't trust you right out the gate. And so a genuine compliment, there's plenty of examples, but I don't want to give you any lines to say. But if you notice something about her that it compelled you to move towards her and take action to talk to her, then go ahead and say that. Like, that's the thing that you should be complimenting her on. I am intensely interested in most of the women that I meet. Like, I go out to the bar every night. I go out in daytime, and I love new humans. I love the variety. I love the novelty. I love getting to hear their stories. I love telling my story and see how they react, and I love that stuff. So it's not hard for me to find, in that mindset, it's not hard for me to find something super interesting about them that drew me to them. I have a very good understanding of what drew me towards them. And sometimes they're conventionally hot. They look like they came out of a magazine. So I will go tell them that. Like, that's what initially attracted you, but what else you got going on? And so that fits into all sorts of frameworks. If you run Sasha's framework, you run Matt's framework from the attractive man, the compliment qualified clothes, the cold approach stuff from like Natural Lifestyles or any of those people. Like, all these people you find on YouTube to how to do the approach. Well, like, it still fits into the framework that you come in, you be honest about what brought you over there, you make a bold move, and then you tell them why you're there, so that you establish this what Todd would call a man to woman conversation. It's like you establish the fact that you're attracted, and that's why you came over. Otherwise, why the fuck are we talking? It polarizes that interaction, so that if you come over and you compliment them and you give them good feelings and you don't make them feel unsafe, then there's not going to be a lot of hard rejection. It's not going to be like, hey, fuck off, because you're not trying to grab or get something out of it. They don't feel the need to push you off. They might say, thanks, I'm married, or whatever, but they will most likely appreciate the fact that you approached, and they'll appreciate the fact that you were bold enough to go do that, because if you do it in an open way that's super honest, it doesn't come across as guarded or untrustworthy or unsafe, generally. Sometimes you might walk into a situation where a woman has something just happened, or they've got some trauma around the getting approached thing, or they're in a relationship that they're afraid to get out of an abusive relationship, and yeah, so you get some weird responses, but they're more aberrant than not. It's not like you're gonna go in and get rejected 15 times out of 15. Like, it's more like they're going to brush you off lightly because you're another human being, being vulnerable, showing your soul, and they will generally respect that if you come up with that kind of energy. If you're gonna continue to have a conversation after this initial compliment and introductions phase, then the next general tip is to ask open-ended questions and give them space to talk about themselves. Now, this kind of it's a good, like, social networking kind of tip. If you go out into a party scenario or a business event or something, and you ask people open-ended questions that allow them to, expand on who they are, they're kind of motivated to share with you their deep inner details of their life. But in a cold approach from a polarized kind of man to woman type of interaction, or something that assumes attraction, um, there are many types of girls who will get really defensive right away and start holding things back and make you prove yourself. And so, asking open-ended questions, if you have three or four in the pipe, and you're just like, all right, so how are you going to change the world, or what are you going to what's your plans for the next 5 years, or whatever. You ask these questions. A lot of times, you're going to get these like really fucking short responses because they want to throw the ball back into your court. Not only is it kind of fun for them, if they do a lot of high social scene stuff, but they also like don't want to give too much to a stranger right away. So if you're asking open-ended questions, you're gonna have to kind of pry a little bit. The and you're gonna have to add to the conversation to make it kind of normalized. What we did at the Attractive Man was always do reciprocity. Let's say, well, see, like for me, I'm like this. I feel um, this way about it, and this is what motivates me to go out and do this. And so, how about you, right? So by being a little vulnerable and tell your perspective on things, and you could get rejected for that perspective, and so you're kind of you're putting your everything out on the table for them. It also kind of prompts them to reciprocate and share with you at the same level that you're sharing with them. So that's a good way to continue that kind of open question dialogue. But you also have to kind of be getting somewhere, right? You can't just like have a fucking 15-minute conversation about nothing, because at some point she's gonna be like, "Why is he asking me all these questions?" Like you have to kind of establish um, that polarity, that I'm attracted to you, and I intend to move this further into intimacy. Should we like what we hear from each other? And so it's not just enough to go and be like, hey, you looked really interesting. I want to come to say hi to you anyway. So what's your plans for, how you changing the world? And oh, okay, well, that's cool. I'm changing the world this way, and my family values are really cool, and da da da. And then you 15, 20 minutes later, you're still talking about horse shit that has nothing to do with what you're gonna do with her into the future. And I don't care what role you're playing. Like if you're not particularly a leader, and you're looking for more dominant women, that's fine. You don't have to lead the conversation per se, but you do have to have an intention of moving it into something that's more intimate and more connected with in the romantic or the sexual interest kind of way. So, um, and I'm not bringing up a lot of these like Dadian polarity tropes, but just open-ended questions isn't going to cut it. You have to kind of move it in that particular direction. In the same vein, tip three is to show interest in what she's saying. Like you don't want to just kind of like click into your head and be like, all right, well, I got to take this somewhere, and kind of cut her off, and she was trying to say something, and then you're like, no, next thing, kind of lead her down this conveyor belt of whatever you think in your mind is your next actions, because that doesn't work either. Like she's not going to feel comfortable if she's deciding to give you the answers to the questions that you answered. Make sure that you listen to them and you engage with that before you carry on your next steps, right? And this is like a light calibration thing you have to do. You can't just sit around and let her lead everything, um, with her stories and whatever, because sometimes she'll run you over. But also, you can't push things in the direction that you want them to go all the time without having her involved. The difference between kind of old scripted approaching and new, you know, aware approaching, whatever, is not necessarily like tactics or the lines of the things that you're saying. It's really that you're including two humans in the conversation and allowing them space for each other to create something in the middle. Like it's not the more you objectify women in general, and you don't create this image in your mind that she's actually a human being that also has things to say, also has things to offer the thing, and could provide value to you. You could provide value to her. That goes beyond kind of the sexual connections side. Um, the more you move into this humanizing this other person, the better your interactions are going to be because she's going to respond as if she was a human and not as if she was an object. Um, that game works too. You go out and you objectify people. You find the people who really like that, and then you have yourself a new toxic relationship. Nothing wrong with that. You can go out and have your one night stands and do your quick pulls and whatever. But in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really help you grow your communication skills, and it doesn't help you build intimacy. It's one thing to go out and just kind of test to see where the sparks fly, and then find the one that sparks fly for the night, and then you go do your thing, and then you kind of let it all fall out from there. I mean, that's one thing to do, but once you kind of master that, like, it doesn't go anywhere. And I see that in a lot of the guys I work with that are gay or bi. They, because of the kind of commingled reality that they can kind of basically go out with their lust system on and get somebody to play with without too much effort, because they kind of align. They just kind of run the numbers game until they find people who align with it. They are able to do this over and over and over again, but still don't have any savvy when it comes to intimacy, when it comes to vulnerability with another human being. And that's where I think, I'm not trying to be moralistic here, but I think that's where most of your fulfillment's going to come in with a relationship, right? Somebody who can support you and be there with you as you move through the suffering that life is going to throw at you. When you're building a partner, it's important to negotiate as humans. So you got to show interest. That was tip 3. Tip 4 is to avoid controversial topics. Okay, so this again is one of those networking things that works with humans in general. Like, you don't necessarily want to talk about politics or religion and whatever unless you're looking to polarize the interaction. I do a lot of shock stuff when I'm in the bar. I talk about deep sexual topics and my unique perspectives on how sexual relationships and romantic relationships should work, and these are kind of controversial, and I have a high risk, high reward when I do that. Like, some girls are really like, okay, he's vulnerable about this thing, and he seems to know what he's talking about, and he's pretty sure of himself, and he's willing to endure a little bit of shit test when he's talking about it. That works, but in general, you don't want to go too far off the normalcy thing unless it's super hardcore part of your personality and you've learned to calibrate it well. You've learned to, if you start to step on people's toes or offend people, to pull it back and adapt. If you haven't learned that skill, then don't run around throwing shock shit out, because it's going to create issues that you're gonna prematurely offend somebody when they haven't gotten to know you well enough to give you the benefit of the doubt or give you a pass on it. So if you initially approach somebody and want to create attraction, you're going to be better off leaving more mystery or more unknowns in that space than you are to fully explain yourself, right? Because seriousness isn't always attractive at all, right? A lot of people, especially depending on the environment, they don't necessarily want to be all super serious and talk about deep stuff till 6 in the morning staring at the stars. They want to have fun and banter a little bit and play along and create unique social situations that kind of get the dopamine stuff firing off. And so to go super deep into a subject, whether it's polarizing or not, can shoot yourself in the foot. So keep the conversation light, keep it fun, and don't go too into the controversial space right away, because there's plenty of tools and plenty of things that you can work with that are generally human acceptable with the person that you're talking to, without diving into things that set off triggers that you can't calibrate on, and offend things that you can't wind yourself back out of, right? Um, in As you move to more advanced stuff, then you can start trying pushing the boundaries on this stuff, and then calibrating backwards if you start to offend people, or if you get misunderstandings, or things aren't communicated well. But in the beginning, definitely just avoid the controversial shit until she brings it up, and then be honest about what comes out after, right? If you try to just agree with her because she said something and you have no idea what the fuck she's talking about, really, it's better to just be honest about it and be like, okay, well, I don't know much about that stuff. And then I get a lot of the people who have ideologies, like they're vegans or they CrossFitters, or hate sexual trafficking or whatever, and they'll be like, "Oh, you don't know much about that? Well, here," and then they'll fucking break out and educate you on all the stuff with their virtue signaling, and that's fine, because you start bringing up passion, you start making her feel important and all that stuff. But you got to kind of watch out to make sure that she doesn't take over the whole thing and look at you as an enemy and use it as an excuse to just tear you into little shreds. That's healthy too. Like getting yourself to stand up in those spaces are also healthy. So just avoid it until she brings it up, and then see how you fare. The fifth tip for attracting a women conversation is to be yourself, and don't try to be somebody you're not. And a lot of advice, this is like, go out, just be yourself, don't try to be anybody but you, because everything else is taken. Like, okay, yeah, exactly. The only reason that you would not want to be yourself in an interaction, and by be yourself I mean like be honest with what you're truly feeling, is that you want to manipulate the situation in one way or the other. Like, you want to hold things back so that you're not hurting people, or you want to hide the fact that you think a certain way so that you're going to make her more attracted to you, or whatever. There are varying different levels that you can kind of control the interaction at. But really, if you are trying to be somebody that you're not, eventually she's going to see through it. And not because she's necessarily that socially intelligent or whatever, but humans know when they're being lied to. Like, there's a core feeling there. And you may be the slickest sales guy on the planet, the best pickup artist, or have the best calibration, and create this fake fantasy of a relationship. You can do that, and you can get really, really good at it, and bait and switch and do all that stuff. But especially when you're starting out, like, the results that come from that is a different type of result than building honest, connected, attracted, and dare I say healthy relationships. You can get into a weird power dynamic by creating this fantastical scene that you guys kind of both agree to, and carry those relationships on for years. But it starts to break down over time when you're constantly trying to keep up this power play, or this impression that isn't you. It's just a lot easier in practical application, not necessarily easier to think about and do, but easier in practical application to just kind of bumble around as yourself, admit that you have issues and problems and fuck ups, and then deal with those things in real time, because the tools to back yourself up come from inside when you're being you. When you're being some sort of other version of you, and you put on a social mask that's too far apart from your core identity, then you don't have a backup at a certain point. You can push, and then there's nothing under it, because it doesn't come from your identity. It comes from some constructed thing in your head. So be yourself. Don't be someone you're not. The sixth one is to respect her space boundaries. There's one thing about being kind of alpha and forceful and putting yourself in a position where you're leading all the time, right? That's a common thing that's taught through the pickup industry, through the red pill industry. Like it's, fucking just grab a bitch's hand, right? As society kind of evolves, and consent's super important, and we don't want to make any dumb fucking decisions when it comes to coercion in that way. Uh, it's much better to test boundaries and ask when you're not sure, and then take the space that they give you, knowing that, like, they'll know that if you push a little bit and say, hey, I'm interested in this direction, and if you're not okay with it, let me know. Then they'll know that when they give you space, that A, you're going to take action, and they're going to respect you for that. And B, if they're not ready yet, they feel comfortable that you're not going to go push something that they're trying to signal that they don't like. It goes back to that thing I was talking about earlier of treating them like they're humans and not like they're objects. It may sound elementary, but when you get in your head and you're afraid of rejection and you have like all of these concepts flying around and you get really excited about possibly getting to take things further, and you have a scarcity idea about that stuff, it's really easy to kind of lose sight of like who you are and who she is in the moment, and just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna try this and that, and forget the fact that there's another human who's also making decisions in the thing. I've seen it time and time and time again, and you can kind of vilify that and be like, oh yeah, well, fucking all men want is sex and they don't care about us, and and you can get all crazy about that if you want, but sometimes we're just stupid and we can't see past the end of our nose, and you put us in a bar situation, but you in a bar situation, and you're like, got your judgment impaired, you're gonna have issues with having clear, concise communication, and add on top of that the idea that you might be attracted to a little traumatic shit. You might be attracted to toxic stuff, and you kind of go out playing with that. That all puts up these iffy gray area things. There's a lot of people who on the YouTube and on the social media, it's like, oh yeah, consent is never a possibility, when you're intoxicated, but like in real life, every night, people go out to bars and they hook up under the influence of alcohol. I'm not saying this is good or a moral right or whatever, but like I personally made a rule that I just don't hook up with girls who are intoxicated. I don't like. I can't afford scandal. I don't want to ever misread a situation and do something that is dumb, and to be questioned on it, because I'd like to have a little higher moral ground on the sexual front. But it happens all the time. Like, people go out and they pull their inhibitions down and they act on their kind of baser level desires that may be stopped at a higher level of functioning. But when I'm giving you advice to go out and go talk to people, definitely respect the physical boundaries they're setting. Ask permission as you're moving things forward, because it's only more mature this way. Like, you're only gonna you're not gonna get into the crazy deep dark issues of consent and what she might think later or whatever. But you also like are going to be respected by a different type of woman. Like, they're gonna be like, yeah, I really respect the fact that he wanted me to be included into this escalation process, and a lot of the women nowadays, probably at all times, but a lot of them nowadays, is much more socially acceptable for them to push forward and be included in the seduction process, which is how seduction works anyway. Like, you're not gonna puppet strings and coerce some girl into hooking up with you and make her feel good about it. Like, they are complicit in the process. They just need to be kind of, they need to know that you know what you're doing, and then they kind of trust you with that sometimes. But there's no reason not to include her in the decision making of that. So you got to respect the personal space, respect the boundaries, and also continue forward with your intentions. If they're still into you and they want to talk to you and carry things on, and they're not ready yet, then feel free to talk about the escalation later, and try to move things forward later on as you get more and more comfortable, because those things change very, very quickly as she becomes more and more attracted to you. And then tip 7 is to be confident, not arrogant. You can always tell when somebody's being too try hard, trying to impression manage, trying to get go over the top with their confidence to show that whatever. I got this buddy of mine. He goes out all the time, and he's doing pretty well in the dating scene. But whenever something kind of crosses him wrong, he really overcompensates. Here's an example. He texted one of these girls that I know, and he was like, "Oh yeah, let's hang out or whatever," and she kind of left him on red. Well, the next time he went out to the bar, like I know from going out for years and years and years, the girls will look at the text messages as they pop up. They don't want to fucking deal with it right now, and they just kind of like leave it. And it's not a personal offense. They don't go like, oh, that's Duke. I'm uncomfortable with that guy. Fuck that guy. I don't want to talk to him. I'm just gonna leave it. Like, yeah, there's one thing to say that like, if she wanted to, she would, but also having your expectations that she's going to give you a lot of value in her mind and try to prop you up when you haven't really given her much to build that picture with, like, it's okay to get left on red a few times. Like, it's fine. Like, it's not a big deal. But when your ego kind of attaches onto that, then like he will go overboard and be like, oh, you know what? If you don't want to talk to me on the internet, after you gave me your fucking contact info, then I don't really want to talk to you in person. And he's like, what he's trying to do is he's trying to show the fact that he's not going to get manipulated around. He's not going to be a doormat. He's not going to be walked over. He's not going to be made to feel simpy or whatever. But in reality, what he's doing is he's giving an uncalibrated reaction that's not matching the territory. Like, the map is not matching the territory because these girls have abundance. They leave guys on red all the time. They go back and second and third string their rosters, and sometimes it's okay to be third string, especially when the first two fuck up, right? Like, it's only your ego that stops you from capitalizing on an opportunity that you might be sharing with another group of people or a bunch of other guys. If you're out, especially if you do a lot of your approaching at bars and stuff, if you're out, you're in competition with every other man in that club. And she might have a whole list of candidates that she's testing out and feeling her way through. And if your ego has a problem with the fact that you're competing with the other men in the club, then if you can't stand the heat, get your ass out of the kitchen, right? Like, there's no reason to think that a woman of value that you thought was attractive, that you are looking to connect with, that other people are not trying to connect with them. Like, it's dumb. Like, and so it's not actually calibrated to reality. So the thing that you're trying to show, the thing that this guy's trying to show, is that he's like, oh, I won't be walked on. It's like, yeah, but you also aren't going to get the opportunity to if you continue that horseshit. So what I mean by be confident, not arrogant, yeah, I mean, have your rules and have your boundaries and be assertive and be confident in the fact that you are a high value human and don't look for her approval and all that. But at the same time, you gotta have your fingers on the pulse of the social scene that you're in. I had a guy who was in religious scene. He was he worked in a church, and a Judeo-Christian church, and there were certain expectations of the society around him. Like, you cannot like be the same type of sexual that I would be. in that environment. It just wouldn't work because there's some serious issues with how the environment expects you to act, and so he had to kind of let go of the standardized teachings on how to like talk to girls at bars when he's hanging out at Sunday school. It's contextually different, and um, he was able to kind of let go of the ego for it and do what he thought was going to work best, and then iterate until it worked for him. And he ended up getting a girlfriend and got married at some point. Uh, but there's the reason that you're trying to be arrogant, or you're trying to put forth a not you version of yourself, is generally just because you're nervous or you're afraid or you have like a fear of the unknown. Like you just assume that whatever is going to come out of your mouth isn't going to work right, so you're going to overcompensate, and that always creates a lack of trust in the relationship, and it doesn't really allow attraction to form unless it's a toxic kind of attraction that is like not based in trust. Like if she likes the bad boy side of you, and you're a little bit dangerous and you're turning her on in that way, sure, that works. I'm not throwing that out, but um, for her to be able to future project longevity in a relationship and create trust, she's got to be able to trust what comes out of your mouth. And when you kind of overshoot with arrogance, you're again impression managing. You're not being yourself, and you're not able to predict what's going on in your presentation. So those are my 7 tips. Start with a genuine compliment or observation. 2, ask open-ended questions and encourage them to talk about themselves. 3, show your interest. Make sure that you're in the conversation, you're actively listening, and you're engaging. 4, avoid the controversial shit right away until you learn to calibrate. 5, be yourself. Don't be somebody you're not. 6, be respectful of their boundaries on physical escalation or physical space. And 7, be confident. Don't be arrogant. Those are going to get you a long way when you're going out and practicing actually in field. And like I was leaning on early in this conversation, in this video, I was leaning on, you need to go out, try this shit, and run into real world problems. Otherwise, none of this mental shit's gonna fucking help you. Nobody's system is gonna work if you don't go out and put yourself and your humanity in the mix with other humans. Yeah. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, then I will see you guys tomorrow for the next episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, please check the link below. See what we're offering with live training. See what we're offering with the mailing list and everything. I think I'm going to launch those in a couple days, so it'll be available here if you're seeing this after the live release. And then if you're watching little snippets of this thing on Instagram, then click where you need to click. Link in bio. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow I think we're talking about confidence in general. And I hope you're having a good Christmas season. I will see you. And until then, stay awesome.